I'm sure you heard Governor DeSantis say that the war in Ukraine is a territorial dispute. You would disagree?
The war in Ukraine is not a territorial dispute. It's a Russian invasion. It's just the latest instance of Russia attempting to redraw international lines by force. And the United States of America must continue at a quickened pace to provide the Ukrainian military the support that they need to repel the Russian invasion. And that the stakes are that high. This is a test of American leadership and a test, frankly, of the free world. And as the leader of the free world, as the arsenal of democracy, America needs to continue to ensure that the Ukrainian military has what they need. Anybody that thinks that Vladimir Putin will stop if he overruns Ukraine has another think coming.
Mike Pence making the case for American support of Ukraine and standing in stark contrast to Ron DeSantis and to Donald Trump. Let's bring in the roundtable. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, former DNC Chair Donna Brazile, ABC News senior White House correspondent Mary Bruce, and ABC News political director Rick Klein. So I want to get to DeSantis in a minute, but first, Governor Christie, what is Donald Trump doing, telling the world he's about to be arrested and calling for protests? What's going on?
The circus continues. I mean, look, he only profits and does well in chaos and turmoil. And so he wants to create the chaos and turmoil on his terms. He doesn't want it on anybody else's terms. John, you know this. You know him well. He wants it on his terms. But look, at the end, being indicted never helps anybody. It's not a help. Now, I think that this of the three investigations, I think this is the one where people know the most. And so because they know the most, they're going to take it less seriously. I don't think there's many Americans who don't believe that Donald Trump had an affair with Stormy Daniels and that don't believe that he paid her money at the end of the campaign to keep it quiet. So I don't think that the American people probably see this as a huge crime. But the vision of a former president of the United States being processed, fingerprinted, mugshotted, you know, for what else do you expect Trump to say, as I said to George last week, than to say it helps his campaign? But being indicted, I don't think it ever helps anybody.
And Donna, is there any concern, though, about that this is the case? You have a democratically elected Manhattan DA prosecuting him over hush payments to a porn star. I mean, this wouldn't be the case Donna Brazile would be.
Oh, Stephanie Clifford is her actual name. She's a native of Louisiana. She lived in Louisiana.
Of course she is.
Yeah, but let me just say this. Donald Trump was being provocative. Donald Trump was selling or advertising his next rally. Donald Trump was once again...
In Waco, Texas,
in Waco, Texas, a week from yesterday, next Saturday. Donald Trump understands how to play this game. He believes that if he can get out in front of a story, no matter what the story is, and he can set the terms, then this is all about Donald Trump. Everything that happens in Donald Trump's mind and world is about him, his need for recognition and resources. The next tweet, if you're doing poorly, as so many of you are, and you know, I'm trying to act like Trump.
It's truth. So you're quoting Donald Trump.
Do not send anything.
Yeah.
If you're doing well, which was made possible by the Trump administration, notice he drops Pence all the time, he said, then send your donation. This is about Donald Trump. No one is above the law. The last thing we want to see is a sequel to January 6th. We don't want any harm. I mean, people can protest peacefully, as the former vice president said, but to incite another mob, no.
And he is daring his other Republican rivals and potential rivals to come out and to attack this DA. And one who has said nothing so far is DeSantis.
Yeah, look, I think he recognizes this is potentially a major moment in the early part of this campaign. It's putting people on record on Trump. It brings up January 6th all over again. And it raises the question that you got into in your interview with Mike Pence about whether there's any room there to be with Trump enough, but not all the way, particularly when it's through the prism of a prosecutor in New York who has partisan leanings, knowing that this prosecution is questionable, knowing that it could blow up, knowing that there are stronger cases out there. How do Republicans handle this moment? Are they going to to parade the fact that Trump is potentially in handcuffs this week, or are they going to say maybe this isn't the right case to bring, but by the way, we disagree with him on other things? It tells you again how hard it is to walk this line on Trump.
And Pence comes out by attacking but also in a measured way, politically charged, not politically motivated. What are Democrats saying, Mary?
Look, I think what's interesting to Donna's point is he's laying the groundwork here. That's what Donald Trump is doing.
Yeah.
He's good at it. What strikes me about what Republicans are saying also is what Kevin McCarthy said yesterday, coming out and saying that he wants to launch an investigation into whether any federal funds were used in, what he describes as this political persecution. But it does, to Rick's point, show that Republicans are walking this incredibly fine line. What are Democrats doing? They're sitting back and watching the show, right? They are perfectly happy to sit back and watch this play out. And yes, while Donald Trump can argue that, this ultimately will politically help him, it will drive his numbers, and it may very well. But I think for Democrats right now, they're going to sit back, let Republicans fight it out, let it show that Republicans are in this incredibly difficult position, trying to figure out how much to distance themselves from Trump, and certainly, running against a felon wouldn't be a bad thing for Joe Biden.
But Governor, what was Kevin McCarthy talking about?
Look, I think...
seriously, what did he mean by that?
I think two things can exist at the same time, John,
Yeah.
right? So you can look at Alvin Bragg as the Manhattan DA, see that he's a partisan, see that he, in lots of people's opinions, including people who live in Manhattan, has failed doing his job regarding violent crime.
I mean, the mayor.
Eric Adams doesn't like Alvin Bragg.
Yeah.
But you can also think that Donald Trump is not someone who could be a winning general election candidate for the Republican Party because of all these things. Those two things can exist at the same time, and you're not walking a line. I think you're just telling the truth. And so what I think Kevin McCarthy is doing is what Kevin's done all along, which is he's got a small majority of 6 votes in the House. He's got a very raucous caucus, and he's got to try to talk about someone who's walking the line. Kevin walks the line every day, so that's what he's doing, and so that's
and Trump
part of the
clearly
theater
called
of it.
on him to do that. I mean,
Well,
he had to hear.
I don't even know that Trump has to call on him at this point to do it. I think that Kevin understands what he needs to do to manage his caucus. And by the way, when he says things about Alvin Bragg that are partisan and negative, he's not wrong, in my view. But it also doesn't mean.
But calling
that
out a federal investigation into
John,
funds.
That's all he can do, John.
This is the definition of weaponization. I mean, to weaponize and to go after a DA for doing his job, the DA is following the law. This is about the law.
We don't know that yet.
Yeah, well, of course, we don't know anything. But,
right,
but the point is, he has said openly that he's going to follow the law. This is about the law. And we'll see. And the one thing he has said to his credit, he said, I will do my part in the court, not on TV. But look, this is a party that continues to say that they are for law and order when it suits them. But it doesn't suit them when the crime is gun violence, when the crime is seeing this country suffer from the kind of violence and crime across the board.
I'm not going to stand up for that because let me tell you who doesn't. Let me tell you who doesn't enforce law and order when it comes to gun violence. I go into New York City every week. It is a danger zone to go into Manhattan because Alvin Bragg is running a revolving door and not prosecuting gun crime, not prosecuting violent criminals. And if he does, he lets them out within 4 hours of when they're arrested to commit more crimes. So let's not get into that argument because Alvin Bragg has failed miserably. And all of a sudden he wants to get tough on Donald Trump.
But you do have Republicans that are going up against law enforcement now, defund the FBI. I mean,
well, that's wrong too.
So, but let me ask you about what we just heard from Mike Pence. He's obviously he's coming out a little stronger against Donald Trump, but he can't quite go too far. What's your take, Rick? What's he trying to do? Is there a path?
Well, this is the big question that's looming over this race. We know about Trump. We might know about DeSantis, who's polling very well, but you're seeing a lot of breaks in Republican ranks with DeSantis as well. But Trump still has this big segment of the electorate. Is there some group of that might peel off and support another candidate? And is there something else you can consolidate behind? That's the notion that Pence is testing. Pretty clearly, he's running for president. He's saying all the things that you have to do, going to the places like you were out with him in Iowa to do it. And I think this is a calculated break, but it's a very Pencean break because he's not going all the way, right? He's still taking that half a step back. He's still going to call out prosecutors, and he's still going to say that he was with Trump every step of the way until January 6th. That measured language Is that something that Republican primary voters are willing to go for? That is the big question that's going to loom over this race for a while.
I mean, you're still calling, Mary.
Mike Pence has a loyalty problem, right? I mean, is he loyal to Donald Trump's supporters? Or is he loyal to the part of the party that's trying to break away from Donald Trump? And he is walking this fine line, but I'm not sure how well that serves him ultimately in the long run politically. You know, we were discussing this. Do you have to pick a side at some point?
Yes.
Because he's trying to, appease everyone, and it's not sure how long that's going to work. And I think, about him really sort of twisting himself into a pretzel there, trying not to be too critical of Donald Trump. He'll say that line that history will hold him accountable.
Still says he's a man of his word.
Yes, and that people are disappointed in his actions in the run-up to January 6th. And this is an issue where I think Mike Pence is also really going to have a problem, because think about those days in the run-up to January 6th. He was not exactly someone who was there calling out conspiracy theories about election fraud. He was not telling Donald Trump to knock it off. And he certainly since then has not been outspoken about election deniers. He campaigned for some of them in the midterms. So which side is Mike Pence going to be on? And there certainly is an opportunity for him now, especially as you see DeSantis and Trump try and slug it out. There's a middle road there that Pence can take, but he's got to be careful, I think, in how he moves forward here.
Look, I introduced Mike Pence to Donald Trump.
So this is your fault.
He didn't know Donald Trump, had never met him until the spring of 2016.
Yeah.
So I've known Donald Trump 3 times longer than Mike Pence has. And Donald Trump's not a man of his word. So let's just say it. I mean, and if you think you're kidding, ask David Perdue in Georgia if Donald Trump's a man of his word.
We tried to get,
when he got him into the race as governor and then backed away from when the polls weren't good. Ask Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania if he's a man of his word. Ask those folks whether they stood by him and he stood by his promises. But I think the bigger problem is the question for someone like Vice President Pence, I'd suggest, would be at 2:30 in the morning on election night, how did you feel when you heard Donald Trump standing in the East Room of the White House behind the seal of the president saying the election had been stolen? Yeah. Did you agree with that? Yeah. And if you didn't, then why didn't you come out and say something? Yeah. And so I think giving him the leeway to January 6th is pretty generous, John. Yeah. Because the rhetoric that caused January 6th started that night.
I mean, you are correct, and in fact, it started before election night. Right. He started laying the groundwork. So before we go, Rick, Republicans have come out and piled on big time on Ron DeSantis. I mean, we see this kind of being sensitive about not taking on Trump too directly. I mean, after what he said about Ukraine, the territorial dispute, what do you make of this?
DeSantis is taking the Trump position, but they were criticizing DeSantis, not Trump, on Ukraine. I think they smell blood. They see some vulnerability, and I think they are echoing, including many elected officials and some potential candidates, they're echoing some of the concerns that are out there in the Republican donor world. Is DeSantis really the guy? He hasn't been tested on the national or international stage, and can he do the thing that others are worried about doing? Can you be Trumpy enough, but find an avenue to break?
And I want to read something Chris Sununu said about DeSantis this week. He said, no one's gotten to know him the way they need to get to know him. I don't know if they ever will. Do you think Ron DeSantis ever sat down for a cup of coffee with a reporter? No, it's physically not in him. He can't do it. He doesn't have the social connection with folks. What do you make of it? Right now, he's the leading alternative to Trump.
Well, look.
He's not running yet. He hasn't announced.
And by the way, in 2015, Jeb Bush and Scott Walker were the front runners at this moment in the race in March of 2015. So I don't think it much matters. I think what matters is how you perform. And ultimately, he had his first moment for performance this week, and in my view, he failed miserably.
On Ukraine.
On Ukraine. Look, a territorial dispute, John, is when you get your property surveyed where your house is, and they come back and say, your neighbor's fence is 6 inches into your property. That's a territorial dispute. Not when you take tanks and artillery into a free country and try to take their land and their people by force.
There's only 2 lanes in the Republican Party right now. The Trump lane, and he occupies it 100%, and the anti-Trump lane. Mrs. DeSantis is trying to get into the Trump lane, and he's going to get badly beaten. I don't think he will do very well. You know why, Chris? I've seen you work a room. I don't think he can work a room. He can read a script, but he can't work a room.
All right, on that note, we are out of time.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.